June 2nd, Middleborough Gas Electric Commission meeting. Wish everybody well. This is the first time in how long?
Over a year. It was
Over a
February of 20.
Yeah, over a year that we've been able to meet together. Let's pledge allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Announcements and recognitions.
No announcements and recognitions
No?
for me.
Okay. Is there anyone who would like to offer a public comment or any unanticipated subjects that need to be brought to our attention?
We do. We have a safety moment.
A safety moment. Okay. And Kyle?
Right over here.
Okay, there you are.
It's nice to see everybody finally.
Yeah.
So our safety moment is that the Atlantic hurricane season began on June 1st and runs until November 30th. The NOAA's Climate Prediction Center anticipates another above-average hurricane season this year. If there's a hurricane approaching, please pay attention to emergency information and alerts, and test your generators and charge important electronics like cell phones beforehand. And then National Lightning Safety Awareness Week is June 20th to 26th. So know the forecast of your area and have a plan if a thunderstorm arrives. The only safe place during a thunderstorm is inside a building or enclosed vehicle. If you can't get indoors, avoid water, open fields, and isolated trees and other tall objects. You can find hurricane safety tips at ready.gov/hurricanes and lightning safety tips at ready.gov/thunder-lightning. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is review and possible vote to accept and release the open session minutes of May 5th. Is everybody here?
Chairperson Healy.
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy makes a motion to accept and release the open session minutes of May 5th, 2021.
All right. Is there a second? Okay. All those in favor, I'll take a poll vote. Larissa?
Aye.
And,
I don't think you need a poll vote anymore.
no?
We're in person.
Oh, okay.
Put us in the ways after that one year.
All right, then we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify you're accepting the minutes by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay. Get a whole new repertoire over here, right?
Yeah.
You're on mute.
Yeah, that's good. New business. We have a presentation on the 2020 Audit Report. Who's making that presentation?
That's great.
No fight now.
Hi, I'm Kristen Newell, the accounting manager at Middleborough Gas Electric. And first, I'd like to thank the accounting department staff, especially Anwar, our accounting supervisor, for all their hard work and being able to complete our audit very smoothly this year. It was our first year without Lewis, so we were able to go ahead. I also like to thank Elaine Silvio and Associates for all the accommodations they made to make this COVID time audit process efficient as possible. I'd like to mention that I sent a memo in your packets for to the Commission dated May 28th, which included three questions regarding to the audits that was changes from the draft that we sent you originally. All of them are resolved and they're updated to what we asked for them to be updated to, and they're in the final copies of the audit reports that you have in front of you. And finally, I'd like to introduce Jim Goulet from Goulet, Silvio and Associates to discuss the results of the 2020 year-end financials.
All right. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And thank you for having us again this evening. It is just absolutely wonderful to be not at a Zoom meeting. I don't know that I've been to a Light Board meeting. We do, as you know, many of them. And so the problem with the Zoom meeting is I'm not really technologically, up to date with things. So unless a grandkid is around to help me get on the computer and get in the right, click the right buttons, I'm lost. So this is wonderful, and it's great to be here, and you can even hear me without having a mask on. So, as was just mentioned, the audit did go very well. We've been challenged over the last 2 audit, periods to work remotely, and the cooperation that we received from the light departments, and particularly your accounting staff, has really been tremendous, because we're just a constant interchange of documents through emails, and so without being in person, it's not that easy. But it went very well here, so thank you. The audit report itself is, fortunately, and congratulations, it's a clean opinion, no issues, no concerns. There actually are some departments that we have to qualify the opinion this year because they're in a different retirement system, and the actuarial statement that they produced from that is not up to date. It's like a couple days short, but you're in the system that works very well, and we have your information. So clean report, clean opinion. Beginning on page 3 is what we call the management discussion and analysis, the MD&A. That is management's report on how things went this year. And I typically many times say to the commissioners, if your constituents come to you and say, how are things going at the light department, just have them read the MD&A, because in layman's terms, it's a great way to understand where you stand, how things are shaking out, whether you're making money, losing money, and continue to grow. So that's a great report. I won't spend any time on it because it's not prepared by us, but in the process of auditing your books and records, we do make sure the MD&A does not conflict with the audit report itself. So that's all in good shape. Our audit really begins on page 7, which is a statement of net position, sometimes called a balance sheet. So it's a snapshot at December 31st of how you were financially, how did you look, as opposed to the income statement, which is over a period of time. So the assets are broken down between current and non-current. So current are typically the assets used, and I apologize if I said this before at other meetings, and you will understand this, but just to keep on the same plane. Current assets are assets that are available for use to run your business within the 12-month normal operating cycle, whereas non-current assets are long-lived assets, typically plant, things like that, which they're there, they stay in the books, we own them, but they're not for current use. They don't pay bills. So your current assets went from $35.2 million to $38.3 million. Pretty healthy increase. It was a very good year, and I would say of the 18 departments that we get involved in, this year was probably as stable as when I've seen. Our revenue, it's either slightly below or almost right on the same. Power costs were down a little bit. Transmission costs didn't creep up as much as I think we'd expected them. So generally, this consistency is, I think, the word I use as far as 19 versus 20. Non-current assets, again, that's your depreciation fund, your pension fund, reserve trust fund, and there are some small investments. That's probably Hydro-Quebec there. And then your utility plant, which really is the major asset on the books, $24.6 million, up from 21, almost 22 million. So really, that's the building, the plant, the poles, the towers, the trucks, the whole infrastructure of an electric light department. And that's depreciated value, cost minus depreciation taken over the years. Okay? The deferred outflows, you'll see this on both sides of the balance sheet, the assets and liabilities. So deferred outflows and deferred inflows are simply timing differences on when you might use money for either OPEB or pension typically. So sometimes you might prepay money that's due to the town for the pension obligation or the OPEB obligation. So these are just timing differences. And the other timing differences, the actual studies really drive both the pension and the OPEB. So when the actual study is done at one point and then it's redone a few years later, there are some targets that were in the first one that weren't met. You might have over-earned on the earnings or under-earned, or there may be just variances. Those actual studies have tons of assumptions in them. So the deferred inflows and outflows takes the net changes in those and amortizes them over a 5-year period. So for example, if you anticipate to have a small profit on your investments and they were large, well, rather than pick that whole thing up as income 1 year, because it's really not fair, they get amortized over the next 5 years. So that's going to be a 5-year rolling cycle. And you'll see in the back there's a schedule of that. Okay? It's kind of a concept that's a little strange to understand, but it's really just timing differences of when you recognize income or expenses. So total assets 88.4 million, up from 85.1. On the liability side, the good thing is you don't have a lot of liabilities. There's no debt. There's accounts payable and accrued expenses. Those are 5.4 million, down from 5.8 million. So, typically that's your December power bill paid in January and some other accruals. Non-current liabilities. So the liability is truly, we know the pension liability got brought on the books a few years ago, and it's a huge number, but it's non-current. So it's not going to be paid until sometime way down the road. Your share of the town's liability is $12.9 million. Significant amount. And you can imagine there was no liability in the books for years and years, and all of a sudden we bring on a number like 12.9 million. What does that make your financials look like? Usually, I have some of the departments have negative retained earnings. So you're at least positive. The net OPEB liability went from 0 to $1.9 million. So this is a good example of where a change in actual assumptions changes liability. And you'll see down the road when we get to the back on the OPEB, one of the highlights I'd like to point out is what's a 1% change in the discount rate mean on this liability. So this is a good example of you went from being fully paid up to owing $1 million, technically owing $1 million of being behind. So, but it's all actuarial driven. The total liability is $19 million. Then the deferred inflows of resources. Again, there's OPEB and pension there, but there's a few other things that are in there that are really just timing when you might use these reserve funds. You get the reserve trust fund, the reinstallation reserve, and the contribution native construction. And again, that's just timing, because what happens is if you do a project in town and a contractor, let's say someone does a subdivision and you provide all the electric infrastructure for that or gas, you're going to own that at the end of the day, but you're going to reimburse the contractor, as I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong with the way this works. So that cost that you recover from the developer is going to be amortized against the depreciation you take on the asset that we now own. Okay? So the net position, which is sort of our equity, if you will, our assets minus the liabilities, a total of $51.6 million, up to 48.8, is broken down into our investment in capital assets. As I mentioned earlier, that's at $24 million of plant and assets, fixed assets. Our depreciation it has its own net position, because depreciation by statute, 164, is a restricted asset. You can't use it for anything but capital improvements generally. And then the unrestricted net position, even with the pension obligation recorded and the OPEB, you're still at a $21.5 million surplus or addition. Okay? So the balance sheet looks very strong, in good position, and improved even from last year. Page 9, we go to the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in that position. We call it an income statement, income and expenses. And again, consistency, if you look down at the line, look at the two columns, it's unbelievable how consistent they are. Your sales are almost identical, just down very slightly. Your electric power was down, again, just slightly. Gas power, again, the numbers are just so consistent year to year, and again, this was a pretty good year for most departments. So your operating income down to the middle of the page is $3.4 million. Only a difference of $200,000 from last year. Again, consistency. Your investment income, 486 to 264, went down somewhat. And again, that, remember, investment income is measured at the end of the year, because you might have some stocks and bonds invested, so there could be unrealized gains on those. I know one December 31st, I think 2 years ago, the market had tanked right at December, and it made these statements look terrible that year. But next year they were great because it all recovered. And that 486 could be some of the recovery from 2018. So net position beginning was 48.8. The transfer to the town, which is again retrieves a below the line expense, because DPU doesn't allow you to take that as an expense against your rates. 924, up slightly from 869 the year before. So your net position, the $51.6 million, again, that's the number on the previous page. It made up all three numbers: the plant, depreciation, and the unrestricted. Okay? The next is the statement of cash flows. For light departments, this is really not very relevant. It doesn't really mean much to us. You might look at this for an enterprise and say, geez, are they paying their bills? Do they have enough money to pay their bills? And that's just what I look at. So what you do every day is you sell gas and electricity and you pay the bills related to that. So that's your operating activities, and you had an excess or surplus cash of $7 million. Now, that's not profit, but that's just excess cash flow. So the next section down below is you use $4 million of that for primarily buying new assets, improving and increasing the plant. So enough said about the cash flow statement. Page 11 is the same thing, only in more detail. There's two ways of recording the statement of cash flows. The first one's like a summary, and this was a detail of the actual balance sheet accounts that changed. But the bottom page 11, those are the cash accounts that we consider operating cash because they are unrestricted. The $28.1 million is your operating fund, and the pension fund it's not technically a pension trust. It's just money set aside for the pension, so that could be unrestricted. So 36 million up from 33 million on total cash. Page 12 is sort of a standalone statement for your OPEB. You adopted an OPEB trust fund so that you could actually fund that with utility money, which I think for light departments is a great idea. I don't think towns and cities can necessarily do this because when we have an expense on our profit and loss statement, the theory on light departments is we collect through our rates all our expenditures. So we're required to record pension expense and OPEB expenses, which we previously didn't before. You're actually technically building it into your rates. So if we're going to collect the money from the customer and say, customer pay me my OPEB money, then we really should put that aside. And that's the concept of this OPEB trust fund. It has $6.6 million in it. Net investment income down below is 557. You started with $6 million, you're about $6.6 million now. And you didn't make any additional contributions to it. The fund, it was all what you'd previously funded in recent years. Okay? Any questions on the basic financials before we get to the footnotes? Okay? Trying to not go too fast, not too slow. So the footnotes again are the rest of this, from pages 13 to these get longer and longer every year as GASB requires us to put more information in there. I have about 39 pages at the end. So, note 1 is really just a summary of accounting policies and procedures. There were no changes this year. Fortunately, no GASB pronouncements that come into play. So I don't think note 1 has any changes worth mentioning. You can read those at your leisure, and certainly any questions that come up on these, if you get to take these home, read them, through the department, we'd be happy to help answer any questions. On page 15, note 2 begins, and it's just, so what the footnotes do sometimes is expand what's in the consolidated statements. So prepaid expenses, it's sort of interest, well, what's that, what is that, what does that mean? So you purchase power prepayments to $146,000, so you're required to put money up with them from whom your power bills get paid, so that's part of the capacity account.
Yep.
Okay? Investments. You notice a small investment on the balance sheet. Well, that's just small interest in Hydro-Quebec. It just never goes away. Note 4, funds held at E&E, Energy New England. You have only, $22,000. So that's not your major, EMWIC is your major power supplier, but you are doing work with E&E also. Okay? Funds held at EMWIC, note 5. So you have, in the middle page, about $3 million with EMWIC from which your monthly power bills get paid. Remember I said your accounts payable is probably your power bill for December? Well, that money is actually already sitting in the prepaid expense, and then it gets paid out of that in January. Okay? The PASB fund is small, that's not worth mentioning. Note 5 is a reserve trust fund, which you wisely decide to set some money aside for the rainy day, for the extraordinary hurricane that might come through here or whatever, so that's a good fund to have. Depreciation, we're just reiterating what the Chapter 164 says about you're required to keep depreciation. It can be segregated, you earn the interest on it. That money is part of the town treasurer handles that fund. Concentration of credit risk, nothing new there. Major customer, nothing new there. 10% is the threshold for a major customer. I'm going to skip number 9. Let's go to page 18, because number 10 is a little bit time on because this is, I mentioned your major asset, that $24 million number. So this is the schedule that shows what you began with, what you added in the increase column, and then the decreases, which would be retirements. You notice the decreases, the top and the bottom of the same number. When you retire an asset from a light department, in general, it doesn't really matter how long you kept it. Usually it's beyond the depreciable life. So the asset and the depreciation are treated to be equal. So you don't have a gain or loss on a disposition or a retirement of an asset, at least for DP reporting purposes and GAAP. So that's a good schedule of, where you're spending your money, the biggest number being, say, distribution plant, $1,689,000. Okay? At the top of the page, the construction in progress. So this is a good example. You might have a project going on in town where you spent some money, and until the project is complete, is this a meter project? Okay. So that's, you've invested $3.2 million in that. So when those meters are finally completed, which I believe is in 2021, and they're put into service, that $3.2 million plus whatever the issue costs will be put down below under, I would say, distribution. Is that general plant or distribution? How much? It'll move into your plant accounts. Okay? Related party, page 19, note 11 talks about just interaction with the town. You provide services to them. You reimburse them for certain expenses like insurance. That's all. Nothing new. The pension footnotes go on and on. This one, the first one, 12 talks about, I think, the provision of the plan. So if we skip to page 21, I just want to highlight down the bottom of the page, this is where the deferred inflows and outflows, as I explained to you before, come along. Now, it's only been 4 years so far, so next year there'll be a 5th year. And then we'll be dropping one year from that point going forward. This explains the differences in why we didn't meet our target, or did meet the target or exceeded it. Page 22 talks about the various assumptions in that study. We wanted to talk about the investment policy on page 23, and then the discount rate, which is a major factor in the determination of your liability. So on the very bottom of the page, this is of all the pension OPEB, the only things I look at when I look at these returns, these forms, is what is a 1% change in the discount rate going to do to our liability? So you're right now at $12.9 million with the discount rate of 7.875. So if the discount rate went down 1%, which means we didn't earn as much money on this money invested in the plan, our liability just grew to $16.4 million. So 1% is huge. And again, if you earn more money, you'd be at 9.9. Okay? Good information, I think. This whole pension and OPEB, it's a moving target.
Yeah.
It's just going to change every year. Risk management, we talk about your involvement in the self-insurance trust, which we also have an audit, and it's in very good shape. Then note 14 goes on to the other, the OPEB trust fund. When we talk about the trust fund, we're talking about the money you have invested in your own trust fund, not the money for the town, just your department's share. When you get to the investment section, it talks about levels, level 1, 2, and 3. Those are, when you look at the investments within the trust fund, how risky are they? How easy is it to determine their value? So you're all on level 1, as most light departments, I think, almost all are. Level 1 is easy to determine the value. You can Google it. It's on the stock market generally, or it's cash or cash equivalent. So as you can see on page 26, the $6.6 million is all in level 1, the same as last year, 19 and 20. Okay? So no high risk. Again, cities and towns are limited. You can't just invest in, Bitcoin, I think. It's all regulated by the state. Let's see. On page 27, right in the middle, again, I guess I'm always drawn to the numbers. I'm a number person. So the liability went from 6037 to 7618, just because of the actual study. Even though your income or your assets available to cover that went up substantially by almost $500,000, a little over that. You went from having a refund or an overpayment of $14,000 to a deficit of $1 million. Nothing to worry about because next study will change.
Yeah.
So, the actual assumptions go on to there. 14. So page 29, no 14. Unlike in the pension section, the discount rate is the comparison we look at. In the OPEB, there's two, because the OPEB money, part of the major actual assumptions, the discount rate is important, but there's a second one called the cost of health insurance, which, as we know, is going all over the place. So the first one, the discount rate, you're at $1.9 million, as we mentioned earlier. So 1% discount would almost double it, or wipe it out if you went in the right direction. But the yearly, the current healthcare trends, and using 4.5%, if that went down, you'd be, again, just about break even. If it went up, you'd more than double it. That's the thing to watch. We can't control that, but it's the thing to watch in terms of what the effect would be on this overall liability. Then the other post-employment benefits talks about the actual plan itself, the number of members, the deferred inflows on page 30. We talked about, we do have 5 years on that because that's been around a little longer. Note 16, we get to, and stop me anytime you want, if there's any questions, but on page 31, we get legal environmental matters. Nothing noteworthy, nothing came to our attention that would require you to carry any liability. Purchase power and gas supply commitments are obviously your largest commitments, but that is, I know in this town, very well managed between your consultants and E&E work, and what you do yourself to manage these contracts is very, very good. Because I think the idea with managing that is to keep your rates stable. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, there used to be this big sideways schedule of all the EMERC projects that folks were involved in. It went on, it so how many years your debt service was year by year. Sometimes it ran over 2 pages. Now on page 32, we're down to one little schedule. So a lot of those projects have been, they've reached their maturity, even though they're still operating and being extended. I think Seabrook is being extended longer. But so those are your costs, which again, compared to back in the day when you're paying all that debt service, I think all the debt's paid off now. That's the end of the footnotes. The remaining section is required supplementary information. So I'm not going to even go into it in great depth because it's again, on page 34, it's required supplementary information related to the net pension liability. This is going to become a 10-year spread to show the history of what's happened with the pension. So it's going to grow in the 10 years. And it's really all the same information we've been looking at, what your liabilities, what your funding is, and all that stuff. Page 35 is the same report for the OPEB. 36 is back to the employer contribution and retirement investment returns. And then the last note on page 37 is where we have to required to disclose any change in actual assumptions. So in the case of the OPEB, this is all OPEB related, the discount rate was decreased from 6.5% to 6% as of December 31st, 2020. The healthcare cost trends was increased from 5% to 4.5%. It was decreased from 5 to 4.5%. And based on recommendations of PERIC, the mortality table is updated, so the mortality table is another major function in any actual assumption. Page 38 is just a supplementary schedule because sometimes we want to know, how we're doing electric versus gas. Make sure, we're not subsidizing the other. They're both holding their own. And you'll see from page 38 that actually the bottom line is it's on page 39, the very bottom line. So electric for 2020 was $2.7 million versus $2.4 million, up slightly. And the gas was up just slightly from 711 to 759. So again, very consistent. Gas is holding its own, electric holding its own. There's no one, the ratepayers of gas aren't paying on behalf of electric and vice versa. So that's good news. And I'll skip all these quickly. There's a lot of numbers to digest, and I know you may have saw a draft. The other report I do have that you have there is the internal control report. I'm very pleased to say that while there is one new comment, it is nothing to lose sleep over. The first comment on there is is the typical one where, and this goes to every department we do work for, is you don't have a staff on hand that can actually draft financial reports. Frank, I couldn't do it either without Tracy to get it on. I wouldn't be able to do it. It takes quite an education in continuing to stay with the GASBs and the reports and the requirements. Now, we have to do a great job at this, because if we don't, we have a peer review, and every 3 years they come in, and there's another CPA firm actually down around this way, some Rockland, I think, and he comes in and he reviews our work papers for several light departments and our other audits, and all our engagements. And I'm pleased to report that he just came in, and we just got a report last year, and in a clean report, no qualifications at all, so that's EHAP for us. There is one, I call it more of a housekeeping concern about significant accounting processes. So this, I believe, is just simply a communication gap, or something that would be easy to fix between the town transferring your money from depreciation or pension transfers when you actually request a transfer. It's not being done timely. I'm not quite sure why, but it's just sort of a, not being done timely is okay, but you have to just kind of keep needling the town to say, this warrant went through to make a transfer last month. I don't see it on our cash account. And, they may just put it aside. But it's better communication with the town to make sure those transfers are done, so the money's not only in the right place, but earning the right amount of investment for the department. Okay? But those are good comments.
Any comments or anything that any of the staff would like to offer in addition? Okay.
No, we've been going back and forth. I've been talking to Kristen and Anwar for weeks now on aspects of this, but we really appreciate getting that outside vetting of our accounting and our books. Yeah. So we feel comfortable. We do have these two major projects that we're looking at, the substation and the building, and we're really waffling about whether to finance them or really to use some of our capital and depreciation account, and I think that probably is the route we'll try to take. Mm-hmm. We like to be frugal.
Well, as a treasurer of my local water department, we need to replace a water tank recently, and the cost of money was so low, in a way it didn't make sense of using our own money. So it's a consideration today, only because rates are so low and the cost of money is so low. Just a thought,
Yeah.
That was a very small project, not to be comparable.
That's why we brought Ken Stone on to delve into all of that. That's a big help, because that's a challenging area to get into.
So we're in good shape then.
Yeah. Very good shape. Excellent shape. Yes.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
And you as well, miss.
Anybody on the board have anything else? Any questions?
No, I'm new, and it was very clear to me, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yes.
One of the great benefits of being a municipal system is we do have the ability, if there is an event that occurs, we can revise our rates, and you as a board can revise rates. I can revise the purchase gas adjustment and the purchase power adjustment, but it means that we can respond quickly, and we actually have a legislated obligation to pay our bills. So, when suppliers want our financials to vet us before doing business with us, we can actually provide them with that. The legislature has required us to set our rates in order to cover our bills. So we're a sure thing.
I might want to add to this, if I may, Mr. Chairperson, that when we're allowed to take 8%, however, we take 4% in terms of what we earn there. So we've done that consistently.
Well, especially because we're in good shape right now.
Yes.
We are very cautious about rates, and we really do try to keep our rates stable for our customers for an extended period, so we don't leave much of our portfolio open to the market, because things can be very volatile and be a big hit. But as Jim alluded to, if you had hurricane damage, something like that, there have been systems that have had to literally rebuild their entire system after some devastating event. So we have insurance, but we would have to cover those costs. All right.
Very good. Next on the agenda, discuss and vote to award a bid for a cabin chassis for a new electric division budget truck. Is that? Bucket.
It says budget.
I got budget.
A lot of budget talk.
Now, who proofread this? All right. Yeah, I think we'd be better off with a bucket truck.
If you look in the package on the table, it's got the corrected
Yeah, we corrected
memo. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
that's the draft version, but that's fine.
That's fine.
Bill
Yes,
Teller,
ma'am. How are you tonight?
good. Electric Division. On Thursday, May 27th, we had a bid opening for a cabin chassis. We received 2 bids, and no bidders took any exceptions for it. The lowest bidder was Minuteman Truck Sales. They bid for $73,283.64 with a delivery time of 20 weeks.
Okay. Your recommendation is?
Awarded to Minuteman.
And this is to replace a 2010 model bucket truck. We try to keep a regular rotation of, especially the critical vehicles like that, but we'll keep that bucket truck. We won't get the delivery of the new one for a considerable amount of time and won't be able to operate till sometime next year, but we'll keep the older vehicle if we have, say, a pandemic that requires us to have people in separate vehicles, or if we have some weather situation that forces us to spread our workforce more broadly.
Okay. So again, the bid being awarded to, can you give us the amount?
I recommend awarding it to Minuteman Truck Sales in the bid amount of $73,283.64 with a delivery time of 20 weeks, but I expect that to be extended.
Okay, which one of you lovely board members would like to make the motion?
Mr. Chairperson, Commissioner Murphy speaking. I recommend we award the vehicle to bid to the vehicle to Minuteman Truck Sales for the total amount of $73,283.64 with a delivery time of 20 weeks.
Is there a second? Need a second.
I second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Unanimous. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Are you up for the next one?
I'm up for the next one.
This is the other half of the same vehicle.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
All right. Also on the same date, May 27th, we had a bid opening for the 50-foot material handling bucket unit that will be mounted to the cabin chassis that we just purchased. We received 2 bids, one from James A. Kiley and the other from Altech Industries, but I would recommend awarding it to James A. Kiley Company in the bid price of $165,713 with a delivery time of 330 days, but I expect that to be extended also.
Oh,
Okay.
Both of these items that you're voting on were included in the budget for the year, so that this is within the amount that was budgeted.
I can see where you cited it right here. You do have the budget line item number, so that's really good. Thanks.
I had a question, just a quick question, just so I can get more up to speed on things over time. The first vote that we took on that truck, we said it's a regular thing to rotate new vehicles, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that looks like it was an 11-year lifespan, and this other one would be probably something similar. Is that how often you're generally replacing these types of vehicles? About every 10 years, 11 years?
We try to replace the unit, the whole unit, every 10 to 12 years.
Okay, I was just curious
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
The bigger trucks are used, every day, more or less, so
Yeah.
so they get a lot of hours.
I bet.
They don't get a lot of mileage, but they add up a lot of hours, and then
Yeah.
during storms, they tend to take some abuse too, so.
Sure, okay, makes sense.
And we typically will keep one when we brought in the second one for a couple of years, but when we start to have reliability issues, especially in bad situations, we'll generally end up talking to the DPW or another town department who can rejigger the vehicle to use as a sander or something like that. And then we would come to you as a board to vote on whether we want to retire that or offer it to the town for use for their own purposes. And then we would include the value of that to our payment in lieu of taxes, non-cash contribution.
Great, okay.
And also, these trucks are tested every year. We have a company comes in and dielectric testing of the booms and everything else. They go through the whole bucket, boom,
Excellent.
right on down to the chassis and everything, and do a full inspection report to us. So.
Okay, that's great. Okay, thank you so much.
So we need a motion to award the bid.
Chairperson Haley, if I may, Commissioner Murphy speaking, I make a motion that we award the vehicle to James A. Kiley Coat with a total bid price of $165,713 with a delivery time of 330-plus days.
Is there a second?
I'll second them.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the 330 days, the clock doesn't start on that until the cab and chassis arrives.
Well,
Okay.
So actually it's going to be
it's almost a
probably
year.
the summer of '22 before
Yep.
it comes in.
Well,
Thank you.
Be right on top of it.
wow.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is a discussion vote to award a bid for an EV charging station in Jackson Street. Sandy?
Hello all, and great to see everyone. You may recall that we replaced the original EV charging stations behind the town, or next to the town hall here, in February. We're coming to you now because we have received quotes to replace the original EV charging stations at the Jackson Street parking lot. And I'm going to read the memo here, letting you know what the bids or what the quotes were, and I'm going to interrupt it for a moment to give you some more good news. So if we could just look at this memo.
We can stand all this good news.
I can't stand it. Yeah, I've got more. Okay, so this is the award recommendation for the EV charging station removal and replacement at the Jackson Street lot. MGED advertised in the Central Register and posted in the state Combis procurement system for 2 weeks for solicitations to remove the 2 existing electric vehicle charging stations in the Jackson Street parking lot and replace them with a state-of-the-art ChargePoint EV charging stations, meeting current code and using existing wiring and connections. We received 4 proposals by the deadline of May 27th at noon. The results for the qualified quotes, and that's qualified quotes, showing all requested specifications are listed below in alphabetical orders. I'll make a note that one of those quotes did not qualify, which is why you only see 3 quotes here. Horizon Solutions out of Taunton, Massachusetts, quoted $22,339. LilyPad EV out of Overland Park, Kansas, quoted $20,288, but did not include disposal. So technically, they too did not qualify. We required disposal. And then Voltrek out of Andover, Massachusetts, quoted $20,120 and confirmed that all parameters met our specifications. I want to stop here for just a moment to give you a little bit of information about the way that these are quoted and how, if the vendor knows what they're doing and knows Massachusetts law and grant funding, they actually produce a quote that is far more beneficial for the utility. And I've got a little slide up here to talk about for a moment. Voltrek, who we've worked with on the town hall chargers and also did work for the high school EV chargers that are located at the new high school. They are very well aware of the new Mass EVIP grant fund for public access charging, and because these are in public parking lots, that's public access charging. And what they did is they quoted in a way that because this is a replacement, there was something called a trade-in allowance for all vendors who work with ChargePoint. Trade and allowance means basically you're taking out a competitor's charger, EV charger, and you're putting in ours. So ChargePoint gave that credit to the vendor can apply it in the way that they see fit. And if they're smart, they'll share it with people to whom they're quoting. And what they did in this case is they applied the credit separately at the bottom of the quote, rather than the other vendors who applied it against the cost of the charging station, which is considered hardware. Okay, they lowered the cost of the other vendors lowered the cost of the charging stations, and that is how they applied their share or our share of the credit. But what happens is the Mass EVIP grant gives a reimbursement for all of the hardware costs of this installation, including shipping, installation, signs and paint. That will be at a 100% reimbursement. Now, this is what we are anticipating. If the money runs out beforehand, that won't happen, but it's important to note that if we do indeed get this grant, and I'll be applying tomorrow if you approve this, we will have all of the hardware costs covered by this grant, and the software licensing, programming, support, warranty, and a couple of other little sundry things that are not applicable for the grant. Those are basically covered by the trade-in allowance that Voltrek is going to credit to Middleborough Gas Electric Department. So bottom line, we're going to end up paying for these two new state-of-the-art stations about $200.
Wow.
If we get the grant.
If we get the grant.
Yeah.
Everybody's fingers crossed. But that said, it's still the lowest quote that we received.
Yeah.
And I did discuss all of this with the other vendors to let them know, but bottom line, Voltrek not only get us the lowest quote, but they gave us the greatest method of applying it.
Yeah.
Well, and the state and the federal government are really prioritizing creating this EV charging infrastructure across Massachusetts and across the country, so that there is substantial grant money out there if you know where to find it for these kinds of programs. And Middleborough Center, Middleborough area is exactly the sort of area that meets a lot of their criteria.
Right, and if you'll just allow me, I'll end up here with what we're asking for today. Quotes were received and compared. We have confirmed that all vendors were qualified to install this technology with substantial histories of similar work. Also that they all hold current certifications as ChargePoint installers, that's required. The lowest quote was received from Voltrek, who had performed in a similar project for installations at the Town Hall parking lot and have proven proficiency and experience with installations of these stations. Therefore, I recommend that we accept the quote, the removal and replacement of the 2 EV charging stations in the Jackson Street parking lot from Voltrek LLC of Andover, Massachusetts, as a qualified lowest bid in the amount of $20,120.
I have one quick question, if I may, Mr. Chairperson.
Go ahead.
How long is it going to take to install this once we approve it?
Well, okay, there's the trick. We have to get the grant, or at least go through the grant funding process first, so that might take 6 to 8 weeks
Okay.
if we're going to be assigned that. So we might not see these stations installed. We're going to try to schedule it while we're waiting for the grant app process, but because you can't apply for the grant ahead of agreeing to buy the stations, you kind of have to wait. So bottom line, we'll know more in about a month exactly when the stations can go in. And again, fingers crossed, there are a lot of us applying for these grants and a lot of ChargePoint stations going to go in. So it's not like bucket trucks. We don't have to wait that long, but we'll find out.
And the sooner the better.
Yeah, I know, the sooner the better.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Could I ask, I don't want to reinvent the wheel here, but, and I do an awful lot of reading about these different things, you know, coming up to the 2035 and the 2050. But it sounds to me like is the state pointing us in a direction for particular types of charges, or no, a second, and not pointing us at something that is going to definitely get us to 235, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because, for instance, the stations that we're replacing are about 5 years old, just a little over 5 years old. And it's amazing how they evolve.
I'm saying like, all this equipment is like, it's 5 years, you know, so.
It's not like your cell phone, you have to replace it every 3 years.
Yeah.
The beauty, and they're finally getting it, the beauty of these ChargePoint stations, and I'm sure other vendors as well, is that now everything is state-of-the-art digital and software, Wi-Fi connected. These stations can be updated, can be upgraded through the air, you know, through Wi-Fi, through software, which is why we have the software licensing program and support warranty. That's not about the hardware. That's not about someone whacking into the station or anything like that. This is all about upgrading the software and the programming of these stations for anything that comes along that's new. And the beauty of these stations, too, is that we get to control the pricing and the levels of pricing and the timing of charging, the way that we want to promote off-peak and scoot people along. Remember that we did say we're doing the first 4 low. These stations will be programmed in the same way. A person coming up wants to charge at the level 2 charger. They generally need about 4 hours to top off the tank if they're fairly low. And the first 4 hours are going to be at $1 an hour. And after that, we attach a parking fee of $5, so it becomes a $6 an hour if you stick around after 4 hours. We want people to charge and then leave and let the next people come.
That's the challenge with these electric vehicle charging spots. You don't want someone hogging the spot and not letting other people in to charge their vehicles. So you want to, and everybody is connected through a smartphone app so that you'll get a little, you know, your time is running out, move your car. That'll prompt you to move along. But one of the things that's very important is we do have to do some incentive programs or disincentives to discourage people from charging during our peak hours, because these are heavy electric users, especially if we see, you know, any large increase in the number of people driving electric vehicles or larger styles of electric vehicles. And all of those costs, all those kilowatt hours, if they hit during our peak hour, cause us to incur higher transmission charges and higher capacity charges. So that we really want to try to keep people from charging, particularly between probably 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. Yeah, and we've already started doing that with people who charge at home, but we're going to try to do it with the ChargePoint stations that we supply as well within our service territory.
And that's the point of these new stations, is that they're programmable, they're controlled by us, they're in our MGED Drives Electric charging network, and they're branded by us. There's a lot we can do with the current technology, which is state-of-the-art, but you're right. I expect in about 3 to 5 years, there'll be an upgrade that we won't need to change the stations for. You know?
Look, I understand that part, and you're obviously, you know, you're doing a great job. And I understand that, but it's like targeting for the batteries, and of course the batteries are going to be improved. But no, wait a second now, is that the energy? You know, like California's got these hydrogen. Right. I keep reading about these hydrogen stations, and they seem to be pointed at hydrogen.
We have one here off of 495.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a hydrogen fueling station. Large fleet vehicles are using hydrogen, and a small number of other types of vehicles, but it's not broadly used yet. But there's one right at near the intersection of 95 and 495. It's ideally located. I think it's technically in Mansfield. Yeah. But but there aren't very many around.
Yeah, but I mean, I'd rather be on the crest of the wave, and you lose me with you start with all the technical stuff there. I'm too old for that, but
you can do this.
I want to be on the crest of the wave for this product that's going to get us to 2050, if we can possibly, even if it costs us a little bit, rather than, because I can't picture ion batteries going to be the thing all the way to the goal line.
Yeah, no, I know.
And it's the state is requiring this, and they're pointing us in that direction. And
so, 2 points, and I agree with you, because we've been around long enough that we've witnessed these technological leaps, right?
I think
and we know that some of them go in the wrong.
Conversation with computers.
I know,
And
I know.
our computer systems, you
I
know.
know. And all you can say is that it's not just the state, it is all the technology behind the evolution of the car. And all we're thinking about is the car at this point, whether it's what kind of battery, what kind of storage. And you're right, I read an article the other day, and it's way behind where we are right now. So it's not evolved yet, but that they actually can create batteries eventually that will only take you 5 minutes to charge, rather than, and then therefore, why would you need to plug into all of these chargers? So what I'll say to that is, we're not anywhere near there yet. We are at the evolutionary point of cars becoming electric, and darn good ones too. And we know that we are seeing that wave come to our service territory. So we need to try and control it to a point, if we can. Change behavior, if we can, just enough. We're not investing in one on every street corner by any means, right?
Yeah, no.
And I'll be talking to
can't
you in
afford
a
to do
bit
that.
about some more, but the good news here is, as I stand here right now, if we can do this and get our expenses, this town's expenses covered that much, what the heck? You know, but yes, and we've got another grant that we'll talk about in a little bit, but I agree, but I also know you can't sit still. And you do have to watch technology coming at you and work with it, and work with your customers. And we have our share of customers now in this area, including the Smart Charge program, we can talk about that in a minute too, that people are recognizing that they want to go toward this technology and toward public charging as well as charging at home.
I'm
So-
not against that,
Yep.
but if they, eliminate gasoline for a combustion engine tomorrow, everybody's going to be looking for an electric car, and we're also going to have brownouts.
We're going to have to manage it.
Yep.
We're not there yet. We're
I
not
know
there
that.
yet, so I'm not afraid, but
I am.
The many people in this town who love their Ford F-150s are nowhere near there yet.
it's not going to go anywhere anytime
Yeah.
quick.
I was
So I'm-
thinking of a GMC, to be honest with you. That's one I'd drive.
I'm going for the VW ID, I think, but at any rate.
I have a question. Do you think that the rate for a person who sits on it longer than they should is high enough? Because I think some people are going to think $6 is nothing.
It's $5 per hour extra, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, extra.
Yes, so essentially, they're not a metered customer of ours. We're not sending them a bill, it's done through ChargePoint. We're working with them to set those service charges. So they're paying for the service of being parked and hooked up. So we didn't want to go too exorbitant.
So could I ask for clarity, if I may ask Mr. Chair this question? I think to clarify, what you're asking would be if somebody's there for 4 hours, instead of costing $4, $1 an hour, it's $6 each of those 4 hours. Is that right?
No.
Oh,
It's the
okay.
first 4 hours, and
Oh, still you're not.
remember
Oh,
too,
so it's a low hit.
the reason that you get the grant a lot of times is because you are encouraging people to come to you and
Yeah.
charge, right? The state wants you to do this. So you're saying, okay, charge here, but we're going to ask you to vamoose as soon as you're done. That's when it jumps, and we hope that's the signal, from
Yeah.
$1 to $6. And not only that, but because it's ChargePoint and you have the app, you're going to get a little ding-a-ling that says, you're just about to jump to $6.
Well, and I guess it's a fine line. You don't want people to be so fearful of a $50 bill that they're not going to use it.
Exactly.
So maybe it's something that we can see how it goes.
I know people who avoid tolls
Right.
to save their life, and it's like, you're talking about
Yeah.
$1.50 for
Right,
crying out loud,
right.
but it's the game that people play. People ride all over this town looking for the best gasoline price, to save $10 a
Yeah.
gallon,
Uh-huh.
$1, essentially, or something like that. But
I have another question if I may.
Yeah, sure.
So just curious, well, a couple comments. I do think that this is great and you're going in the right direction, and there's no way we can predict technology in 2035 or 2050. In 5 years, like you said, some things are going to be substantially different. Our TVs and our computers, everything just really change at rapid fire pace. We can just do our best to plan accordingly, and you're doing that, and that's awesome. I just had one question about the software and licensing. And again, great, I love this whole thing, I love this is gonna cost us $200 if we get the grant. What are the annual software costs though? Is that number that's folded in there, is that for this year's software costs, or is that like a 5-year plan? What's it look like after this year for software costs?
I'm glad you asked that, and if you'll bear with me for just a second, they list this is a 1-year, now, when you're first bringing a new station online, those online fees are the heaviest part of that $4,000.
Okay.
But then every year you'll pay somewhere in the vicinity, let me get this, we don't need the support active, we need, each year of the cloud, the commercial cloud per port is $329. Okay. And that now port, there are 2 ports on each station.
Okay.
So be aware how that builds up. The
Okay.
more we own, the more we add. Yeah.
Sure.
And everything else too is, there's an Assure plan which basically says we automatically upgrade the software, and which is, as far as critical infrastructure and security and all of that, it's almost impossible to not buy that these days, so.
Right. Okay, excellent, thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, I guess we need a motion, though, for the 20,120.
I would appreciate that.
If I may, Mr. Chair. Larissa, would you like to make this
I'll
motion?
do it,
Go ahead.
that's right. I'd like to make a motion to accept your recommendation to go with Voltrek for a contract in the amount of $20,120.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Thank you.
I thank you so much.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you. Now, who was it that discovered that?
Well, I guess I did, but that's the way they quoted it. And I called them and asked them, why are you quoting with your discount on the bottom? And they said, oh, you're going to want that.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right, I agree.
Yeah, wonderful.
Great. Very well done. Thank you. All right,
All right, Bill, sorry. I didn't wait.
next on the agenda. Discussion and vote to cancel the transformer bid award from May 5th, 2021 due to a supply chain cost increase.
Okay.
Jackie, can you
Bill knows what to do.
oh, Bill?
Do you want to read the memo?
Yep.
Yeah.
Bill Taylor, Middleborough Gas Electric Division. Back on April 28th, we had a bid opening for 44 new single-phase pad-mount transformers, and at the time, the lowest bidder was Westco, and they submitted a bid for ERMCO transformers. The bid price was $89,980.84, and a delivery time of 30 to 32 weeks. So it was approved at the May 5th meeting. You guys voted to accept the recommendation. The next day, we went to issue the purchase order for the bid, and they wanted an additional $5,426 because they said steel price and copper prices increased. So with that, we're not the low bidder, and you're already, the board was for $89,000. So the recommendation would be for tonight to rescind the bid award that you approved on May 5th at the meeting.
Okay. And you gonna go back out, or
That's next on the agenda.
next on the agenda?
Okay.
Very good, okay. I need a motion to rescind the May 5th vote to award, what was the name of the firm?
Wesco.
Wesco.
If I may, Mr. Chairperson,
Yeah.
Commissioner Murphy speaking, I make a motion we vote to cancel and rescind the transformer bid award to Wesco for May 5th, 2021.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? It is a vote.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, discussion and vote to award bid for 44 single-phase pad mount transformers.
Okay, so in light of the rescind, we did another bid. We had a bid opening on June 1st, at 11 o'clock for the new 44 single-phase pad mount transformers. It's been our practice, we evaluate these bids on the total owning cost, cost of electrical losses, and the individual transformers. And below are the breakdowns. We received 2 bids. Power Sales, they had a minor deviation for Howard Industries for the, is the name of the transformers, and a total bid price of $95,878 and a delivery time of 18 to 20 weeks.
Who was the other bidder?
We received 1 bid from Graybar, and their bid price was $103,420, but with the cost of losses, they were $158,288. Power Sales, the total cost with the losses was $151,941. They both took minor deviations, and but Graybar had a 39-week lead time, and that's why we chose for the overall bid price and the total cost to go with Power Sales.
There is no question that all of our materials are seeing sharp escalations in costs and having supply chain issues. So we were pleasantly surprised that they're quoting 18 to 20 weeks, which is quite an improvement over the rescinded award.
So it's Power Sales for $95,878, correct?
Correct.
I need a motion.
Mr. Chairperson, Commissioner Murphy speaking. I make a motion to accept the bid for Power Sales in the amount of $95,878 and a delivery time of 18 to 20 weeks.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those
Thank you.
opposed? No opposed, there's a vote. All right, next on the agenda. Update on grant applications for upgrades to community housing and EV public charge stations.
We're all EV and heat pump tonight. And just to enlighten our newest board member too, I just want to let everyone know, just remind you a little bit, and new to you, Larissa, that this work that we're talking about right now actually began 1 year ago at the June meeting for the commissioners, and the first one I think we did online, if I recall, or in the Zoom meeting, not to bring that back. But we presented to you the fact that we needed to change the services, the energy services programming that we had. We were going to stop rebating more efficient refrigerators and appliances and such. We were following the advice of the Department of Energy Resources, which was focusing more on electrification and more efficiencies that were much larger and much larger investments, including heat pump technology, right? So we started at that meeting. We partnered with Abode, which was here at our March meeting, I believe, when we first gave you this update on the heat pump program. And we partnered with Energy New England, the EV Drive program, to really promote Smart Charge New England, things like off-peak EV charging. We started developing this program starting a year ago, updated you again in March on a couple of really important programs that we want to bring you a little bit more updating tonight, because again, it's all good news. So to the Abode heat pump program, the first thing I want to say is that we did have a New Tech Today video, online workshop, a Zoom workshop, virtual workshop for our customers who are interested in heat pump, installing heat pumps and applying for rebates in their homes. And that really was quite successful in that we had a surge in customer inquiries about the technology, working with Abode, and then we had in 1 month, 7 new applicants for rebates. And this is, it's pricey, it's not inexpensive technology to install in their homes. So we're very pleasantly surprised that we do have a number of customers in our service area that want to use this new highly efficient technology. But when we were last talking to you, we were also mentioning that we wanted to reach out to the lower income potential for assistance to lower income housing. And we were working with Joe Ruthwitz and the Middleborough Housing Authority to upgrade at least one of their major developments, and in that case it was Archer Court. We did the legwork, we paid for the study, Abode performed the study, which is highly technical, and worked with the state's Housing Authority as well, to provide them everything they needed to secure a grant that is known as the Sustainability Grant for the Housing Authority of the state of Massachusetts. And the good news is we learned just last month that it was awarded to Archer Court. And not only that, but it was awarded in full. It does mean that we will be, which we committed to applying our normal residential rebate to each of the units that's going to be installed. There are 27 homes in the Archer Court development, and we're talking about 27 heat pump installations. We will be essentially credited for the savings through the State Department of Energy Resources. That's going to go directly on our reporting to them. And so in one fell swoop, we're helping some lower income residents be able to take advantage of this new technology, highly efficient technology, helping out the town of Middleborough and the state meeting their goals as well. And this installation of this new technology is scheduled to start sometime in September and run through next September. So we hope to have all of this done in about a year and a half. Just wanted to bring that everyone that good news. We got that last month and thought, boy, you never know how much you're going to get in grant funding. You never know how many hoops you're going to have to go through. And this one was a no-brainer. They went for it all, and we're very thrilled about that.
Well done.
Yeah, it's higher than the goal that we had set for ourselves, so we're very happy about that.
What else can we apply for?
Thank you.
What else did we apply for?
Keep going, she's finding them every
Okay,
day.
well, yes, and the next grant that we're applying for, and which you may well be aware because we brought it up last in March too, was we're going for the DC fast chargers, okay? Electric vehicle fast chargers. The state is clearly wanting to locate at least one or two or more high volume, high powered fast chargers which can charge a vehicle, a standard vehicle, in about an hour or less. And they want to locate it in this corridor, this travel corridor. There's a big hole in the map right in southeastern Massachusetts, and we're sitting in the bullseye point, which we kind of like.
They call it Middleborough.
That's why they call it Middleborough, and it is the 495 corridor. They love 44, but 44 coming from the east as well. So we knew we would be a good spot for at least one or two of these stations. So we applied, if you recall, I said we were going to be applying for multiple locations to give ourselves more of a chance to qualify. As it turns out, one of the locations is at the Pearl Street parking lot. If anybody is aware, most people don't even know where there's a parking lot over there. But it's off of Pearl Street, and it connects to Oak Street, and it's right near the St. Vincent de Paul area, and it is within the environmental justice area, designated area in town of Middleborough. So that gives it extra credit when being considered for these grants. The grants will grant $50,000 per DC fast charger. They want you to locate two at a time if you can, and we've committed to that. The excess chargers may also well be covered for installation costs. They set those aside, but we're going to find out how much funding is out there. Again, this is grant award. We haven't got that grant yet, but I can report to you that we're getting an awful lot of back and forth phone calls wanting a little bit more detail and a little bit more detail. And everyone that I've talked to so far seems to feel that it's a no-brainer as well.
Yeah.
They'll probably give us the grant to install 2 fast chargers.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
You know, if we get credit for 2, wouldn't 4 be better?
Well, that's why I put in 3 locations, 2
Okay.
chargers per location.
Okay.
And if they want to go for it,
Well, how
We're
about
game.
4 in each location? That'd be 12.
Worth noting that when we talk about Pearl Street, we know there's a lot of residents in that area as well. These fast chargers are not really focused on residents. They're focused on visitors who are traveling the 495 corridor. So the idea is to not have residents plug into those, so what we're immediately going to do is go for a grant for level 2 chargers in the same location. So you'll be able to plug in a car that can sit there for 4 hours while you're in your apartment somewhere in that vicinity, come back out and unplug it. Or if you are traveling through and you're in Middleborough, it pops up on your phone, oh, there's a fast charger here, I'm going to have to leave my car at that fast charger location for about no more than an hour, maybe 45 minutes. Boy, there are a couple of great restaurants downtown, a beautiful library, a bunch of little businesses I'd like to visit. Yeah, it works.
We're trying to really focus these grants for walking distance to the downtown area and then the John Glass Square area, and we think there are going to be lots of opportunities in the vicinity of the new MBTA station.
Yeah, and this is, I don't know all the parameters of MBTA station yet, but they have been talking about satellite lots if there's an overflow at that location, so.
Yeah, we've talked to them about that.
Yeah.
But what is the social justice area extent? Do you
I think
on a
there,
map?
yeah, I don't, it's, right now it's referred to as environmental justice.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
and it is on Center Street, if you think, Center Street, you know where Pearl Street intersects Center
Yeah.
Street, okay? It runs Pearl Street, and again, up to Oak Street, and actually up to Station Street.
Really goes up to 44, doesn't it?
No, it goes up to the railroad tracks, okay? So if you think of Station Street going up to railroad tracks, it runs along the tracks that way. So all of the roads within that, I'm sorry I did not prepare a slide for this,
That's
darn
okay.
it. But, and we outlined that and showed it very clearly in our application process
Yeah.
too. So that's a big lure, you know,
It is a pretty
pay attention to
area.
us.
It is, yeah.
It is, yeah.
Because you sent me a map when I inquired about it.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a big enough area, and it is within less than a block practically of the downtown.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
just
yeah.
make them walk.
Just take a walk, come on down, have a coffee or whatever while you're charging.
Yeah.
And I would hope that the tourism committee and a few other people in town might be really happy if we get that and get that installation.
Very good.
But I really, just to,
Question again.
go ahead.
Mr. Chair, another question, this way,
Yeah.
more remarks maybe. I think that's just amazing that you're doing that work, these DC fast charges. I think it's awesome, and I think it's such a boon for Middleborough businesses. I love this idea, you know, it'll be great for restaurants and everything that you just said, and I think the tourism committee would get pretty excited about this. But I had a question relative to the grant for the 27 heat pumps at Archer Court. I think I know the answer, but just to be ultra clear, so that's no cost to the residents, it's 100% covered?
No cost. This funding, the residents don't own the property,
Right,
right? But the Middleborough Housing Authority gets its
Okay, that
funding
makes sense,
from the
right.
state.
Yeah.
But they will also get the benefit of our municipal grant. I mean, we have a municipal energy efficiency budget amount.
Yeah.
And we budget for that every year, and we're planning to use this funding to do our standard, which would be about between $1,500 and $2,000 per installation, so.
That's really great. Well,
Yeah.
good grant.
Great.
Thank you. Can I mention just one more thing on the EV side? We did talk about our Smart Charge program as well. We did hit our target for the pilot installation of Smart Charge, which is off-peak charging for residents who own EV chargers. So it's another bit of good news so that we're trying to expand the program and offer it to more customers. So it's worth people out there who are watching that have electric vehicles. We have an incentive program for you, and it's worth asking about it. So go to mgeddriveselectric.org. Okay.
Okay.
All
Very
right.
good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sandy.
Thank you.
All right. You're up, Jackie.
All right, I will blaze through this pretty quickly. I think,
right.
do you have slides that you're going to pull up? I think we're going to probably skip the first three, which is the forecast, because you can't read it anyway. You know, when we do our budget for the year, we project out all the different categories of costs, and then we pop in our actual and see where we go, but it's really based on kind of less of a pattern than you actually see with the weather demands that we get hit with. So that's where, I've talked before in the past about with the electric division, because of the high demand for electricity in the summer, the electric division generally starts out the year in the red, sometimes gets a little deeper red, and then in the summer months recovers a lot of costs and is, you know, in the black as we get towards the latter part of the year. Gas division is the opposite because of the high usage in the winter. So for the electric division, right now we're showing that we're behind for the rate stabilization fund on the year by a little over $2 million. That's actually better than where we were last month, so we're already recovering and making inroads on the electric side. For the gas division, we are adding to the rate stabilization fund by $1 million currently. We know that as we get into the low gas usage months, where we're still incurring the high costs for maintaining our distribution system and our pipeline capacity charges, that we'll start to lose ground on that. But we're really right on target for our budget at this point for our projection, and that's really to kind of stay where we are on rate stabilization, or actually probably nibble at it a little bit, but keep it within that $4 and $6 million combined for electric and gas. For statistics for the month, and these speak a lot to our performance. Now, these are the draft financials through April, I believe. So, we've had another month since then. For the month of May, which you'll see in next month's financials, we did end up receiving the highest electric supplies that we've ever received for a month of May. So we know we have very decent load growth right now, and Mayhew CV from PLM's been kind of tracking this with analysis, and it's looking like our load growth is really within about 3% and 5%. And a good chunk of that could be related to the cannabis industry because they are very, very heavy users of electricity for their growing facilities. So, that's a benefit because it's actually a very even load as well. It's not nearly as peaky as a residential customer's load.
Not many of the businesses have gotten into business yet.
But some of them have started growing, but the few that we have that are doing big business have substantial loads, very substantial loads. So that, it will help us in the long run.
Yeah.
I'm sensitive about it because the majority of our employees are in drug testing programs. And so it's something that we're very concerned about, the proliferation of cannabis products, edibles, things like that. Our employees have to stay away from that because they are tested randomly and on a regular basis, so it could lose somebody their job.
Yeah.
So we really want to be cautious about that, but it's good for the town's business revenues. So on the balance sheet, we are showing that rate stabilization account at the end of the year is currently showing that it would drop by about $1 million from where we're ending 2020. And, when we get beyond the audit, we always end up having more funds added to rate stabilization account than we thought we would see at the end of December. So, it's all to the good. It just means that we're in very good shape right now. And that protects us from having to do anything with our rates. But as you may recall, we did lower the gas rate at the beginning of March so that people's February bills, which was a very cold month, showed that reduced rate. So, this is a good thing, and we look as though we're going to be able to sustain that rate. It looks just fine. All right. And as last year, we aren't contributing additional funds to the OPEB. We're in good shape on that as well. The statement that we received for April showed that we've gained ground on our funding percentage. So as you recall, we had been over 100%, and then we had the actuarial revision for the end of January, so that we were at 86.8% of our OPEB target. Now we're at 91.7% because the market has been cooperating. So all that is to the good. We do need to have that OPEB Trust Board meeting, so we'll have that probably in a month. Now that we're meeting live again, I think that would be a good thing to set up. We did have good news. This isn't good news. We have started sending out shut-off letters. We've started reaching out to customers to get people more current, since we had a number of customers who had not paid a utility bill since September, October of 2019. So we've actually made really good inroads on that, and our total 91 days and over is now less than $1 million. So we're making ground. So all this is to the good, and people have actually been pretty reasonable. Our customer service representatives have been working closely with customers because through the COVID relief funds that were made available to the state, there were resources available for renters, for utility bills, and the process was really not onerous, so that our CSRs have been helping people to get that paperwork prepared. And when they're approved for this, the funds come directly to Middleborough Gas and Electric Department, which is great. So we're going to keep working at that as well. All right. Let's go to the next one. Okay, rate comparisons. These are the rate comparisons generated by the Massachusetts Municipal Wholesale Electric Company, MWEC. And they do this pretty much quarterly, and there are lots of sheets for lots of different rate classes, but we like to give you a sampling. And I'm not going to show you the rate comparisons that I generate every month, because that is just, too much at this point. Also, it's very consistent month to month, but you can see that we get a third-party confirmation that our rate is extremely competitive. The yellow lines are investor-owned utilities, so those are utilities that provide some benefit to their investors, and Middleborough and the other blue lines are the municipally owned entities. So, as we've noted in the past, they tend to be the less costly. Middleborough is typically kind of the middle of or just below the middle in the pack. And a big part of that is because of our customer base is more heavily residential than in many of these other towns. We also have some higher costs because of how much area we cover that will always, unfortunately, serve to keep our rate a bit higher than we would like if we had a more concentrated area that was easier to serve. Let's go to the next one. So that's a regular residential customer load. We get a little more towards the middle as we get to a larger load. This is the yearly average, or the average for the April 2020 to March 2021 period. So if you looked at the previous one, which was, I think, only for a month, we were moving down the line. Let's go to the next one. Okay, as you get to higher usage, you're seeing that we're around the middle. So the way that our rates are structured, we don't incent people to consume more electricity. Let's go to the next one. Okay. Middleborough's sources of energy through April 2021, and that's just for this year. And I'd sent you this pie chart through March, and the good story is continuing through April's purchases for supply. We don't have the numbers in yet, the final numbers from our invoices for May. We'll provide that to you next month. But like the month of March, our carbon-free portion of our electric supply portfolio is 70% of the pie, and 20% of that 70% is renewable, is hydro and wind power. And these are all resources for which we are getting the environmental attributes reported to the state tracking system run by NEPOOL in the GIS program. So the carbon-free nuclear is the investment that we have long-term through MWEC in Seabrook and Millstone projects. The nuclear with EFEX stands for emissions-free energy credits, and that's for a transaction that we have with NextEra Energy, which owns Seabrook. And so for our purchases from NextEra, half of that supply is getting the environmental attributes, and half of it is just the load following nuclear, for which we don't count the attributes. And then renewable wind, We have Saddleback in Maine and Carthage, Maine. And renewable hydro is the share of the New York Power Authority, which we get through Massachusetts, which has MWEC administer that program. Every year, they recalculate because that New York Power Authority hydro access to energy and attributes is based on your residential base. And so most of the other municipal light plants have seen those numbers drop over the years, bit by bit, as their residential numbers drop. Middleborough, on the other hand, this is, I think, the third time in a row that our residential numbers are increasing. So our actual share of access to those NYPA resources has been increasing. We incur some costs for it, but it's very inexpensive power. So, and that's really credited and tracked for our residential customers. And then we also have renewable hydro through First Light, which has the two dam generation resources in Massachusetts. And we had significantly increased our share in that contract starting this year. And that's really where we went from a much smaller percentage last year. I think we were around 3 or 4% last year to the 20% this year. And Ken Stone and I have been meeting with First Light because we're talking to them about extending that contract. It runs currently through 2030. That's all they were willing to do at that point. Now they're seriously thinking that they could go to 2040 or possibly 2050. So that we'd be very eager to extend our arrangements with them. And we actually had included language in our original contract that said we wanted to write a first refusal on extending that agreement. So this is all a good thing.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair? Isn't it a big jump from the 70%? I can't remember what it was.
It's not a big jump from last month, but it's, last year we were at around 65, between 63 and 65
yeah, but I mean,
for 2020.
We've never been 70.
No, we've never been 70, and that's really because of that jump this year in our commitment to those resources, and especially the First Light jump really brought us up to that level. And we should be at that level through really 2030 to 2035. So I think with vision, you know, we're going to really work to try to support keeping to that level and increasing that level. And the other thing we are really going to work to do, and we've already committed to some renewable projects that will add to that 20%, you know, that's the goal, to keep that number up, but to increase the renewable portion, not just the carbon-free portion. Yeah. So all to the good, I think. Let's go to the next one. Yes, I do. I did this last week when I put a package together for you, and this is the actual ISO pie chart on May 26th, which was, I believe, Wednesday? It was the peak for the month. Yeah, Wednesday. It was 10 cooling degree day, which means that the average temperature for the 24 hours was 65 degrees is 0 heating degree or cooling degree days. So a 10 cooling degree day, the average temperature for the 24 hours was 75. So there was some air conditioning load. Some people more than others, right, Bill? Okay. So I took the pie chart for what ISO New England dispatches all of the resources in the region. And so in that pie chart, you see that natural gas was by far the larger share. More than half of the resources used that day were natural gas. This is not Middleborough's pie chart. Middleborough's pie chart would look much more similar to the other chart for the way it's broken out. This was the actual dispatch. So you can see that nuclear is steady as a rock. This is Millstone and Seabrook, and you know, God forbid anything happened to them right now, but that is carbon-free, very consistent within a few megawatts. And then you see that the solar portion, that is understated, because at that time, and this was the hours of 4 p.m. to 5 p.m., so hour ending 17 is 5 p.m. So the load was 18,120 megawatts for the entire region. Now that happened to be the peak for the month, and the monthly peak was, I wrote it down somewhere, was just a little bit higher than that. So we were very close to the peak for that day. But you can see what supplies were available for dispatch in that hour and reliable dispatch. And there were no big system issues that caused anything to trip off, any problems. And you can see that that little planet that's hanging out there, that's what's imported into ISO New England. So the lion's share of that is Hydro-Quebec imports over transmission lines. But then there are some additional resources that are imported as well. But there are also, that's balanced with exports to other areas too. So you can see that, the ISO pie chart right now for what is needing to be dispatched in order to maintain regional reliability is quite different from Middleborough's commitments for what we're buying for our customers and getting credited for. Just looking through, for stats for the month of May, again, I mentioned that we had our highest electrical requirements ever in a month of May for last month. The peak day for last month was, as I mentioned, May 26th, hour ending 19. Actually, the actual peak was between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. The month was 26% warmer than 2020, but only 6% warmer than the 10-year average. So it was really not that unusual a month. Middleborough's peak hour, which is interesting because in a lot of regions you're going to have consistent peaks between ISO New England, your transmission provider, in our case it's National Grid, so those were consistent, they both hit the same peak, but the town of Middleborough's peak was different. It was on the previous Sunday between 5 p.m. and 6 p.m., and it wasn't that hot a day either, but if you remember, we had that Sunday when it felt oppressive, it was quite humid, so that was Middleborough's peak. The coldest day of the month, and this is for the gas side, was actually last Saturday, the 29th, was very, very chilly out. The highest send-out of the month for Middleborough, though, was much earlier in the month. It was on Friday, May 7th. For the gas side and the electric side, you're typically not going to see peaks on Saturday and Sunday. There tends to be a natural reduction in that load on the weekends. But, the lowest send-out for Middleborough, for example, was on May 22nd, a Saturday, a really mild day. Without ocean spray, the peak was actually, the high send-out day was different. It was at the very beginning of the month. And somebody explained to me the other day, actually one of our employees explained, that he had already shut off his heating system for the year, and he was damned if he was going to put it back on for the cold that we had last weekend, so he ended up shivering on the couch all weekend with a blanket over him. So, that's what typically happens. So we had that high send-out May 2nd. The low send-out was actually consistent with our firm customers and our total load, including our interruptible customers. So, for projects, I'll do a very quick. For the substation, we are planning on having a presentation that Ken and Mike Barrett from PLM will do at the July meeting, I believe. That's not a threat. It's a preview of coming attractions. For the building situation, Ken and I are working with a consultant to prep the competitive process to hire an owner's project manager. And that's the industry professional who would be doing all of the research on what process we have to follow to get approvals, permits, whatever on that building. But we've had some of the commissioners come in, look at the building, see what we're challenged with. We still are encouraging members of the select board to come and see our facility as well, because we want people to understand that while we value the building and its history, we have to be secure and able to meet the technology needs, cybersecurity needs for the long term and for reliability for customers. We can't move the substation, and that basically has locked us into that location to some degree. On the meter transition, Linda Seaman has been meeting with Itron and troubleshooting some of the issues we've been having. Our territory has some Bermuda Triangle type zones for communications. So as we knew it was going to be challenging and told Itron, they assured us they had it all covered, there would be no problems. Now they're owning the problems. So we're working with them on that. But we're very excited about the amount of information that we're seeing out of this resource, and we look forward to being able to convey a lot of the information about load patterns to our customers in the future. The administrative building has opened its doors for the first time in a very long time. We are still asking people to follow social distancing protocols and to be very thoughtful about it. It's a quirky building, so that spacing out people is a challenge. We also really need to do whatever we can to protect our workforce because, as Kyle mentioned, hurricane season has started. So we need to be ready to act if something happens. We had the MEAN meeting last week, the Municipal Electric Association of Massachusetts. And a number of our commissioners came to both days of the meeting. It was terrific. Representative Tom Golden, who is in the House leadership on Beacon Hill and has been a very good supporter of municipal light plants, even though he doesn't have one in his own representative area, came and spoke to the meeting, and it was great. And I think still is a strong supporter of local control and of following the path we've followed. He did make a strong statement that it was important that all of the municipal light plants get together and commit to the carbon targets that we've agreed to that's now state law. So that, that was really good to hear. We also had presentations on insurance claims, which is always a big issue for municipal light plants, and on easements and obtaining easements. We had also a legislative update from the professional who works with us on the Hill, and 2 bills have already been filed to up the ante on the current climate change law in Massachusetts. But we're hoping that since those targets are so ambitious that we won't see any major changes to what we've already committed to at this point. So, but, as you saw from our numbers, Middleborough Gas and Electric is in a very good situation to, achieve those targets well in advance of the deadlines. We also had a nice presentation from the GM in Groton, who's trying some interesting rate structures to try to recognize different rates to people for their energy use, their electric energy use during certain hours, to incent people to reduce use during those peak hours. It was interesting and challenging. It's something that we'll be interested to see the results. I thought it was astonishingly complicated and based on many assumptions, and the one challenge that we've had from day one is that the details of the game change constantly, so that it's very hard to put in some kind of a structure based on a lot of assumptions based on where things are now, because this is a rapidly moving legal structure for the way ISO prices things, for the way the FERC treats things. It is very challenging for all of us. We did have good news this week. If you recall, the Hydro-Quebec projects that we are part of, and actually Jim Goulet alluded to in his presentation, they were approved by the FERC, so that we had been part of a group working either through MWAC or directly in one case, looking to extend those contracts. They're very advantageous to us. We pay costs every month for those contracts. We don't really use the resources ourselves, but they are valuable on the market. And we've worked with Energy New England to facilitate selling those rights to use those resources to others at a nice savings for the ratepayers. So that was approved, and that was kind of a big deal. FERC also has recently held meetings to discuss initiatives to improve access to the regulatory process for climate change and for environmental justice advocates. Because right now there's a concern that there hasn't been a clear path to have a voice in Washington at the FERC. And this current FERC commission is very interested, and they're going to create a whole department that's going to be supporting access to that legislative process to get people's voices heard. Okay, I think that that's about it.
That's it.
Does anyone have any questions about what's going on right now?
Any questions at all? Any other subjects to bring up? I'll entertain a motion.
Larissa, would you like to do this? Close this out?
Sorry, can't hear you.
Because he's looking for a motion.
To adjourn the meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Unless you
to
get
adjourn.
another one.
Sorry? No,
Unless
I
you
don't
get
have
another
another one. I have a lot of questions, but I don't have anything else to add
Okay.
right now. I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.